Hi, Hugh Lopdell here from Oak Park Chartered Accountants, and Happy New Year to you all. A better year, I hope, eh? All right, before I start, I'm releasing a video series on buying a pharmacy in February. It'll be on YouTube and video, so look out for that. If you know someone who's buying a pharmacy, let them know. It'll be a good free resource for them. All right, this is the second of my videos on the subject of discounters. Now, in my first video last month, I encouraged community pharmacies to fight back by clearly identifying what they as small pharmacy operators are good at and getting excellent at those. In this video, I'm giving my view as a non-pharmacist professional specialising in the industry on the effect discounters are having on the industry and what the underlying issues are. I have no stake in pharmacy. I do not stir as a rule. And if I do, it is never for stirring's sake. But sometimes I'll say something if I see a glaring problem and either no one's prepared to speak out or feels free to speak out about it. Now, what I'll say in this video is I believe the truth, but it will not be popular with some officials in the New Zealand health sector. So if you're from the ministry or a DHB, thank you for tuning in. It might be safer for you to switch off now, but if you're brave, carry on listening, and I do hope you do. But whether what I say is palatable or not should not be the issue. If it's the truth, or mostly the truth, health officials should listen to it and do something about it. My research is pretty broad. It's included consulting with many community pharmacists. I venture to say that had the ministry done more of that themselves over the years, this video would not be necessary. All right, let me start by trying to profile the community pharmacy sector. There are, give or take, 670 owner-operated community pharmacies in New Zealand, and I'm not including Green Cross in that number. The local owner-operated model appears to have served New Zealand well. Owner-operators are financially invested in their communities. They remain in their community most of their working life, and in that time become one of the most trusted and well-respected professionals in their community. Pharmacy funding has for the most part been frozen for years while costs have continued to rise. Script volumes have increased over time. But with the margin on filling those scripts getting progressively squeezed, pharmacists have tried to do more with less, with the result that pharmacy by all accounts has become one of the most stressful professional environments in the country. So attracting and retaining professional staff in this stressful environment is taking its toll. The various unpaid services pharmacists have always provided have now become a pressure point. Things like time spent resolving script errors made by doctors, making up mixtures, pill deliveries, free health service to customers. Now add to that the huge reduction in the last decade of over-the-counter sales due to competition from online and supermarkets. Because we know retail stock carries a high margin and provides a good source of cash. So there's more squeeze on there. Then add to that those specific downward effects on profit. There's pressure created by being poorly consulted by the body that pays them, the ministry, on measures affecting them. Now, this was starkly evident in 2020 with the poorly thought through switch to email scripts and its repercussions, the poor support and communications on how to trade under COVID, there being no apparent understanding of the pressures of extending monthly dispensing that it was putting on already stressed dispensaries, and an $18 million promise of funding that was so poorly researched that almost none of it found a home in the end. And finally, as if all that wasn't enough, the pressure created by the fact that through all of the above, pharmacies do not feel they have a united voice to the ministry and DHBs. So are left to take the fight individually, and if they do, they are quickly overcome. Now most, knowing that the task is too daunting, don't even try. So, divided, pharmacies are easily conquered. Without exception, the pharmacies I spoke to say that the two organisations with a responsibility of advocacy to the government, that's the Guild and the Society, are too often missing in action and ineffectual on some things that really matter to pharmacies. Okay, well, despite all this, owner-operated pharmacies press on, doing their level best to keep the quality of their services high. They are proud local professionals and a valuable community-based resource in our healthcare system. So, into this picture, we have the arrival in earnest of the discounter. Now, looking at the big two, Countdown opened their first in-store pharmacy in 2012 in Newtown in Wellington. It now has 34 pharmacies nationwide. The Chemist Warehouse opened their first store in 2017 in St Luke's Mall, Auckland. It now has 14 nationwide. Now, both have plans for plenty more, and as we know, there are other discounters. They both charge a zero prescription fee, except I understand for Countdown in Invercargill. Now, nothing in what I'm going to say makes discounters out to be rotten. They are not. Or if they are, I can't find anything to indicate that. They employ technicians and pharmacists just as you do, who are good professional people. And discounters are subject to all the same licensing and ethical standards, contract and other legal trading regulations, as are all other New Zealand pharmacies. And neither is the warehouse model wrong. Large retailers always made sense, didn't they? Like it or not. You know, they bring advantages of convenience, bulk buying, lower prices, wider range of stock, regular sales promotions, and longer trading hours. We long ago adjusted to losing our local stationer once the warehouse stationery arrived, and our local hardware once Mitre 10 Mega arrived, and our local butcher when butcheries were incorporated into supermarkets. You know, it's sad, but in all sectors where a large retailer has arrived on the scene in New Zealand, small retailers have been unable to compete and have all but closed in all but the remoter centres. So the question is, are we heading for losing our local community pharmacies eventually, except in remoter suburbs or towns? And is it the same? Because we're not talking about stationery, and we're not talking about power tools, and we are not talking about pork chops. We are talking about the dispensing of medicines and medical advice to the New Zealand public. We are talking about our precious healthcare system where quality absolutely matters. I hope. Okay, let's dig a little more. So, how did discounters do it? I've had pharmacists ask me this question. You know, if any pharmacy removes its co-pay from what it charges its customers, it loses a fair chunk of money. I know some of you have done that maths. Enough that most pharmacy owners would look at the financial results for all the work they put in and say, why would I bother? Now, the answer is the same for discounters. They wouldn't make enough on their dispensing operations to make it worth their while bothering on its own. For them, and this is crucial, dispensing is a loss leader. And if there is rot in the system, that is rot number one. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong on the part of discounters themselves. They're taking advantage of a legitimate business opportunity. The rot is that the Ministry of DHBs have allowed the dispensing of medicines as a loss leader to become a prominent feature in New Zealand's pharmacy sector, and particularly in Auckland. So let's look a little closer at loss leaders. Let's take a non-pharmacy example. Pak'nSave's petrol stations are a loss leader, right? Pak'nSave are using petrol to drive grocery sales. Totally legit. Now, supplying petrol is a dangerous business. Pak'nSave are diligent to fulfil all the regulations surrounding the supply of petrol to the public. They pass all their site and safety audits as they're required to by law, but they sell petrol at a loss. So the motivation behind their petrol business is not petrol sales. Their motivation is the use of their petrol business to maximise the sale of groceries. For a loss leader to be effective, it needs to do two things very well. It needs to generate sufficient extra foot traffic and sales of other goods, one. And two, it needs to cost the business as little as possible without breaching any regulatory or ethical requirements. To do that, a tight rein is needed on costs, and particularly the big ones, wages, rent. And that tight rein creates a conflict with quality. So here are two very highly contrasting models of pharmacy. One is a local, owner-operated, community-based model focused on quality of service delivery. And it is increasingly under threat, except in smaller centres. The other is a discounter model, where a multinational corporate uses its huge buying scale and can dispense medicines as a free giveaway with your next trolley of groceries. Now, if you make low price a focus instead of quality, you put quality at risk. You always put quality at risk. I've had a number of pharmacists tell me how a discounter has not filled all the items on the script because the remainder take longer and they don't hold the stock. Or they don't hold the stock, or they've carried minimum staff and there's no capacity to cover staff absences, so the wait times blow out. Or they don't have time to offer advice, so those questions go to local pharmacies who aren't getting paid. Now, if you want proof about how vital a quality dispensing service is, look no further than the COVID lockdowns in 2020 and monthly dispensing. Dedicated owner-operated local pharmacies did not hesitate to step up and worked extraordinary hours in trying conditions. So, which of these two models, or what mix of these two models, do the Ministry and DHPs favour, and why? I could not find a published Ministry document that answered that question, and I could not find a pharmacist who had read one. Meaning there almost certainly isn't one. All right, let's look at a key question. What do discounters bring to medicines delivery that community pharmacists do not bring to justify the granting of so many licenses and contracts to them? Now, I've not been able to find a single pharmacist or official that believed there were not already enough pharmacies in the community to service the New Zealand population's medicines needs. I've not been able to find a pharmacist to acknowledge that discounters deliver any health service that community pharmacies are not already delivering, and delivering usually with better quality or timeliness. I have only been able to find one possible unique healthcare benefit that discounters offer. Their scripts are free, and therefore they meet a need in the lower socio-economic communities to increase the affordability of medicines. But that can't be the justification used, because in Auckland, licenses and contracts have been issued widely to chemist warehouses across the Auckland region, not just in the lower socio-economic areas. So we're back to one simple reason. The scripts are free, full stop. I read in the 2016 Pharmacy Action Plan outlining the Minister's vision for what he had in mind for getting to where we are today. It speaks often about using pharmacists' skills and technology in smarter ways to achieve better medicine outcomes. Its overriding emphasis is on the improving the quality of outcomes. Quality of outcomes. There's reference to increasing equity and access to Maori and Pacific populations, but this is centred on culturally competent service delivery and not on cheaper medicines. The only other reference I could find in the document was the need for the government to achieve good value for money from its healthcare services given the country's ageing population. But this was an isolated reference and was no way linked to the goal of making medicines generally cheaper to the public, or even to a section of the public. The entire document was underpinned by how we can use smart solutions to improve the quality of an access to medicine delivery going forward. Quality, quality, quality. Now, the point of me outlining this is that nowhere in the minister's strategy was making medicines cheaper to the public a strategy or goal. And that begs the question that given that granting discounters licenses and contracts on such a broad scale had no justification in terms of access to better medicine delivery in the community, and is not mentioned in the 2016 5-year Pharmacy Action Plan, why were any or more than a few licenses and contractors granted to discounters at all? So that is rot number 2. Of all the decisions made by the Ministry through MedSafe and DHBs regarding the pharmacy sector in the last 5 years, the most impactful was the broad opening up of the sector to discounters. Yet nowhere in its action plan was it listed as a goal, not even a minor one. So, cheaper medicine wasn't in the action plan anywhere. But allowing discounters such prominent entry, particularly in Auckland, has skewed the playing field on price. It's made the charging or the not charging of the copay a prominent factor now in people's choices about where they buy their medicines when they have a local discounter option. Now, a pharmacist in an affluent area of Auckland told me that she now gets well-to-do retirees complaining to her about charging the $5 copay because a discounter in an adjacent suburb doesn't charge it. See, the public don't understand what's going on, do they? Where nearby discounters are charging no copay, customers perceive that pharmacists are profiteering by charging the copay. They don't understand that pharmacies pay that back to the government. Customers, rich and poor, make most buying decisions at least partly on price, and they vote with their feet. Now, to add salt to the wounds, I've had numerous pharmacists from around the country tell me that they see scripts from hospitals, DHBs, where the doctor has written on the script to go to a discounter because it's free. Many medical centres apparently have done this too. So it appears to be a widespread practice that is not firmly addressed. So it carries on. And pharmacies usually don't complain because they don't think anything will change. So this is rot number 3. The ministry are not only welcoming discounters into the market for no apparent healthcare benefits, they are actually promoting discounters through some or many of their DHBs. Now, whether that's done deliberately or negligently makes no difference. The skewed market will now always drive business towards those dispensing for free and away from those charging the copay. All right, a word about Auckland. Now, I have pharmacy clients in Auckland. I've spent some time there this year talking with pharmacies, and most raise the overconcentration of pharmacies in Auckland as a huge issue, along with discounters. 5 pharmacies in the centre of an Auckland suburb is not uncommon. The Auckland DHB map reveals some even heavier concentrations of pharmacies. There are 8 on a 1 kilometre stretch of Great South Road in Otahu, or within a block of that. In Panmure, there are 6 and a half a kilometre stretch of road. Half a kilometre. But wait, it gets worse. In Milford, there are 5 within 350 metres of each other. Now, it was into that saturated and subdued pharmacy market that beginning in 2017, MedSafe granted 10 licenses to chemist warehouse stores. Now, what on earth can the public health justification for this be? Pharmacies owners I spoke to were stoic but disheartened. To me, it was hard not to see it as a gross mismanagement of the pharmacy sector in that region, at least in regards to the issuing of licenses and contracts. You know, there are pharmacies in Auckland making less than $50,000 a year, and that's their wage plus profit. So the catchment was never big enough to support them, and they never should have been granted a license and a contract. EBITs of established Auckland pharmacies have dropped, multipliers have dropped, so the values of Auckland pharmacies have dropped. In some cases heavily, and in some cases completely if they're near a new discounter because they've closed. Banks are now cautious of lending into the pharmacy industry due to discounters, particularly in Auckland. The Ministry and DHBs in Auckland know this is happening and they see the struggle and closures near to discounters, but it seems clear enough that the Ministry and DHBs, particularly in Auckland, know that some established pharmacies will lose some or all of their lifetime's hard work in retirement and aren't bothered by it. So that is rot number 4. MedSafe and DHBs acting to produce heavy overcrowding of the pharmacy sector in Auckland with huge effect, yet still allowing broad entry to discounters. So I'm coming towards the end of what I have to say. I used the word rot quite a bit, and I thought a lot about what the best word to use would be. And I use the word to describe a condition and not directly any institution. The thing with rot is it takes time to set in. If you dig around in your house and you find rot, it means you've had a problem for a long time, not a short time. In this context, I believe rot is an accurate word to use. There appears to be an alarming disconnect between the ministry and its community pharmacy stakeholders. Now, I know this may implicate the Guild and the Society, and it's not my desire to implicate anyone, but it is probably fair to say that they are not as connected as they should be either. In its 2016 action plan, the ministry says it values its, and I quote, highly skilled and dedicated pharmacy workforce. And it aims at providing, and I quote again, a world-class, high-quality healthcare service. Now, a free hint to any brave soul in the Ministry of Health. Send out a survey to community pharmacies and ask them what they think of how that's going from their point of view. Then take a big deep breath, read the responses honestly and not defensively. So to sum up, by allowing large discounters to gain a dominant position in the New Zealand pharmacy market, or in parts of it, the government has done and is doing these things. 1, they are heavily promoting a model for dispensing of medicines, which is a loss leader, is low cost and lower service. 2, they are forcing nearby pharmacists to implement a similar model to compete, which they can't, so they ultimately close. 3, they are communicating to nearby pharmacies that they don't value them, aren't bothered if they are driven out of business, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. 4, they risk communicating to the New Zealand public, and this is important, that the value it places on the dispensing of medicines in New Zealand is 0. 5, by not appearing to discriminate, they have allowed discounters to decide whether a New Zealand locality enjoys an overall high service model of pharmacy or an overall lower service model of pharmacy. 6, they are allowing discounters to become the new driver in the future shape and direction of pharmacy services into urban communities, despite this never being in the action plan. Now, if larger discounters have a legitimate place in the New Zealand pharmacy environment, it must be a deliberate policy decision, and the ministry must be upfront with community pharmacy about that and present to community pharmacy where they fit in to the plan. Because right now, community pharmacy wouldn't have a clue what the plan regarding discounters is. They suspect, and I concur, that there really isn't one. Now, I have been blunt, but my aim is to be constructively blunt, which is a different thing, a very different thing. I ran the script of this video past many pharmacy owners who gave it the unanimous thumbs up. And some were grateful I was going to say all this. They feel like they have no voice. And some who said that were Guild members. Just saying. All right, let me know if you disagree or agree and why. My email follows. Remember my upcoming video series on buying a pharmacy in February. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Hugh Lopdell, Remote Park, Chartered Accountant, signing off.